So I have seen Monkey Man, and it's safe to say that this film will get compared to John Wick, and that's completely fair. But the real question here is it better? Honestly, I don't know. It could be, but it's definitely in the conversation, so let's talk about it. As always, this video will have spoilers, so if you don't want spoilers, head over to my shorts, TikTok, or Instagram and check out my one-take movie review on this movie. But without further ado, let's talk about Monkey Man. So this movie is obviously Dev Patel's directorial debut, and it's safe to say he did a really good job at this thing. Now in this film, we follow the main character of this movie, who is also played by Dev Patel himself, as he works as an underground fighter. But living with his childhood trauma, he soon infiltrates the higher ups to get revenge on those who killed his mother. As always, jumping right into the good, and I can't talk about this movie without talking about the man himself, the director, the writer, the star of this entire show, Dev Patel, and what he has pulled off in his directorial debut is nothing short of amazing. You could tell he poured his heart and soul into this movie. I mean, he even broke his hand and foot while filming this thing. So yeah, he pretty much gave everything he had to bring this movie to life, and you could see that in his performance, which is great. His character goes on quite the journey in this film, and in my opinion, he starts as a man who is really just fighting for himself and fighting to feel something because his childhood caused him so much pain and trauma. And as this movie goes on, he finds purpose in that fight and essentially fights for something bigger than just himself. And that allows him to become / represent the Hanuman, who is the Hindu deity that a lot of this story is based off of. But on a side note, to me, this kind of felt like a superhero origin story with the way this whole movie was structured. I mean, there was even a scene where he essentially got his superhero moniker with people chanting Monkey Man after he won a fight. And I know I might be the only one who thinks that, but if you think about it hard enough, this is low-key your classic superhero movie. Next, for the good, I have the action. Now, I went to go see this movie for the action, and it's safe to say it delivered. Even though I wish there was just a little bit more of it. We had action in the beginning, we had action in the end, but not so much in the middle. Anyways, when we do get that action, it was awesome. I mean, this is some of the most brutal and gory action that I have seen in a while, and I'll admit, there was a couple moments in this film where I had to turn away from the screen because of how gory it was. I mean, the part where Dev Patel literally drove a knife through that one guy's throat was just insane. And this is a movie that has a lot of close-up shots, which works sometimes and didn't other times, but I'll touch on that a little later in the video. But when it came to the close-up shots for the action, it really made you feel like you were there, and that's what kind of made this film and all this action feel so gory to me. However, even though this action was brutal and gory and I had to turn away a couple of times, I just have to say I still loved every second of it. Next up for the good, I have the story. Now, overall, I thought the story was really good in this movie. My only dislike with it was the beginning, but that's something I'll touch on a little later in the video. It was your classic revenge story, which is pretty typical for the action genre, but what set this movie apart is the amount of culture that was infused in this story. I mean, they made it known that the main character's story was very much based off the Hindu deity, the Hanuman. There is Indian and Hindu culture in just about every scene in this film, and that is what gave this story and movie some style and flair. And because of that style and flair, this movie didn't feel like your run-of-the-mill action film, and I really appreciated that. And finally, for the good, I have the visuals. Now, part of this film's style came from the visuals that were in it, and even though I'm kind of mixed on the amount of close-up shots in this movie, that doesn't mean that there weren't some beautiful shots in this film as well. Some of these shots definitely reminded me of the John Wick movies, and there were plenty of times in this film where I was just like, wow, that is a cool looking shot. And I think this movie kind of knew when they had a good shot on their hands, because with all the quick cutting in this film, there were a couple of times where they would stay on a shot a little bit longer than usual, almost kind of winking at you like, yeah, we know this is a good shot, so we're gonna stay here for just a little bit longer. Moving on to the so-so, and I've mentioned this a couple times before, but this movie has a ton of close-up shots. Now, don't get me wrong, there are a couple times where these close-up shots were awesome, they were beautiful, and they worked really well, but there were other times in this movie where it just felt felt overused in my opinion. And because of that overuse, I never really got a sense of scale on where everything was in relation to each other, and it also just felt really claustrophobic because we were just so close to everything throughout this entire movie. I just wish they mixed in some more wide shots so we could get a sense of where we were in this movie, but to also let this thing breathe so the viewer could get a sense of scale as well. Next for the so-so is that this movie did use quite a bit of shaky cam during the action scenes, and just like the close-up shots, sometimes it worked and turned out really well, and other times I just couldn't really tell what was happening on screen. Now, I originally had this in the bad, but the more I thought about this movie, the more I think there was a lot of purpose behind this shaky cam. You see, in the beginning of this film, they used a lot of shaky cam for the action scenes, and it was pretty choppy. But this also mirrored where our main character was at this point in the story. He really hadn't become whole yet and healed from his childhood trauma. We were really only able to see fragments of his childhood right there in the beginning of the movie, aka his past was a little choppy and shaky just like the action was in the beginning of this film. But once we got that full backstory and he was able to heal, we not only saw smoother fighting from Dev Patel, but we also saw smoother camera movements like the one shot we got in the kitchen fight. So in a way, the shaky cam was used as a narrative element, and if that's true, then that's pretty awesome, and this should probably be in the good. But at the end of the day, I could also be completely wrong, so that's why I have it here in the so-so for now. And finally, getting into the bad, and I briefly mentioned this before, but I wasn't too big of a fan of the beginning of this movie. I thought it jumped around quite a bit, and it was kind of tough to follow at some points, and I think that's because they kept us in the dark on the main character's backstory for so long. In my opinion, it was just tough to figure out what was going on, and then you mix in all those close-up shots and you don't really know where you're at either, and that kind of added to the confusion of the beginning of this movie. But when they finally revealed that backstory, this movie got really good from there on out. I just feel like they should have did that a little bit earlier in the movie. I mean, there is a moment in the beginning of this movie where it showed the guy who killed the main character's mom, but because we didn't have the full backstory, we truly didn't know exactly who he was. I mean, we knew he was bad, but we didn't know why he was bad and why Dev Patel's character was going after him. I think if we would have gotten that full backstory before this scene, I think it would have worked a lot better, and it would have made this movie even more personal. And on top of that, it would have made the beginning a little bit better as well, because we would have understood a little bit more of what is going on and why. But overall, for a directorial debut, this is a great movie. Dev Patel had a good performance, and the action was just absolutely brutal, but I loved every second of it. This movie is a love letter to the action genre, and I would highly recommend it to anyone who likes action films. Those are my thoughts on Monkey Man. Be sure to let me know what you thought of the movie down in the comments, and as always, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, get your Eazy Apparel at shopeasyapparel.com. God bless, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.